Hello everyone, welcome to my Tron build for my mod to turn the arcade into a multicade. So let me show you a little bit of what I did. Notice there's a button in the upper left instead of the headphone jack. I replaced that so that I could use it to help me exit out of games and change games. Let me show you a few of the games that it has in it. Okay, besides Tron, let me show you a few things that my multicade can do. I can switch back to pick whatever game I want. I can add a whole bunch of favorites. I have the typical RetroPie selection of games. I have Arkanoid. And here's a quick example of Arkanoid gameplay. I made this button my coin button. The start buttons work normally. So the spinner works. Back to the game selection. Here's Tempest. Put in a coin. Pick your starting level, spinner. Play with the spinner. Here's Miss Pac-Man. Here's Galaga, or Galaga 88. Here's a Super Nintendo game. Here's Star Wars. So this video isn't a tutorial, but now I'll go into a little bit of the parts I ordered and why, and some of the little things that I did to avoid any cutting, soldering, or drilling. Keep the price down. It came in like right under 200. So you don't need to watch any more of the video if you're not going to really build your own. In the description, I put the links to all the parts and the tutorial videos that I used. So you can end watching here, or feel free to continue watch all the boring parts of the parts I used and how I put it together. Thanks. Okay, the idea for this build is to try to keep it, I don't know, hopefully under 200. We'll see how it goes. And no cutting, drilling, soldering, everything we would just use, I guess, connectors and tape. So here's a parts list I'm sharing with you. I needed a way to convert the stereo out for the two speakers into my port where I'm going to plug the audio out into. So if you look at the left, there's the female jack to bare wire, and then right below it is a 4-pin connector plug. So the idea is I would connect these two together so that my current Arcade 1-Up speaker, I don't know if it's input or output, but my current speaker jack, my 1/8-inch speaker jack, would go into my audio out that's going to be on my VDI display board, which I'll get into in a minute. So the idea is to connect the top one to the bottom one in one single cable, and I don't have to cut any of the existing Arcade 1-Up cables. All the lights on the cabinet are 12 volt, and there's like, I counted 5 of them. So the three items that you see on the right are a 12-volt power supply separate for all the lights. At the bottom, I bought a couple of female 4-way plugs, and I bought a male to male, a few of them. So the idea is that one adapter would plug all 5 lights or more using these 3 things with no wire cutting. I would just simply plug the male connector that's already on the Arcade 1-Up lights into these little barrel plugs, plug these barrel plugs together, and plug them into the one adapter. So those are all the little things that I'm putting together to try to avoid cutting or soldering or sawing or drilling. Now the main parts that make everything possible. This thing here, thank you Brad D and others. This is the main thing that lets you hook the anything to the existing Arcade 1-Up display adapter. I'm using it for my Pi 3B Plus, but you can use it for your JAMMA board, your Pandora board. You can use it for your PC. You can hook the speakers directly to the board, and I'm gonna wire the existing Arcade 1-Up volume on-off to this board as per Brad D's instruction in his Tron 1 Arcade 1-Up video. So the idea here is that my existing Arcade 1-Up on-off button will turn the Pi on and off, and the existing volume control on the Arcade 1-Up will adjust the volume through this VDI, through the audio output of the HDMI. My original plan was to use all the existing controls, not only for cost, but because I really like the existing controls, but several YouTubers had difficulty getting the existing Arcade 1-Up spinner to work with any kind of encoder, an iPAC2 or any other kinds of encoders. So I didn't even want to try, because if the quote experts can't do it, I know I certainly can't do it. So I went with Brad D's recommendation, and I bought this GRS push-pull arcade spinner, and I went ahead and bought the top for it. I wasn't able to use the existing Arcade 1-Up top because I couldn't actually get it off the pole. I'll get into that in later detail. I couldn't resist this. It was only $27. I'm not going to use the joystick, but it had the encoder board that I wanted, and it came with the all the correct cables so that I don't have to cut or splice any cables, and it comes with cool blue lit LED buttons. I went ahead and decided to buy this kit and replace all my buttons. So for the most part on my Arcade 1-Up, only the Tron joystick's going to be existing. All the buttons are going to be replaced, and the spinner's going to replace, which is the up and down spinner. You can also push and pull the spinner. These are the parts that I've gotten so far. It does increase my cost a little, but I'm still well under the 200. I'll try to total it up a little later. So here's a few more pieces I ordered. The left one is a 5-pin button harness for my Tron joystick, which I'll get into in a minute. And the other one is a smaller button to replace the headphone jack on my Arcade 1-Up Tron hole. It's just any button will do. I don't even know if this one will work, but I just chose this one. I could have a select button on my RetroPie that lets me exit games so I can start another game. So that's what my intended function for this button will be. Here's the new brains I chose for my Arcade 1-Up Tron mod. It's a Pi 3B Plus. This dongle is for a USB keyboard. The SD card has a RetroPie image downloaded with a bunch of ROMs. This is a case with a little fan in it. You can get this anywhere from 30 to 50 bucks. The case might set you back another 20 or $30. It takes a lot of time and effort to download the RetroPie image, configure it, and download a bunch of ROMs. Again, you could do all of this for under 60 bucks, which is one choice. What you can also do is various sites, eBay, Amazon, etc., have the ability to buy a retro SD card already configured, which I actually recommend, although, I'm trying to keep the cost down to next to nothing if I can. You can buy an SD card with RetroPie or any other ROM handler that can play thousands and thousands of games. If you don't want to do a RetroPie, you can buy a JAMMA box, you can buy a Pandora box, you can stick a PC in there. But since I'm cost conscious, I decided to go with the 3B Plus, which is even cheaper than the 4. if you could find it. So that's going to be what's running all my new games. So here's my encoder board where I'm going to eventually plug in all my buttons and my joystick. If you notice, it has a 5-pin joystick connector on the right end, or I could use the up, down, left, and right 2-pin connectors. I'm imagining both are viable to plug my Tron joystick into the encoder board. Unfortunately, the Tron joystick comes with these 2 connectors plugged into the existing Arcade 1-Up controller board. One is labeled up, down, the other one is left, right. So I had a choice of either, I guess, cutting these connectors off and plugging them into either up, left, up, down, left, or right, or figuring out a way to make them go into the 5-pin joystick. I chose neither. I bought the 5-pin harness, which is right here. So basically, this gives me a 5-pin connector, and there's instructions on the Amazon site for how to plug these into the micro switches on the existing Tron joystick. I went ahead on Amazon and purchased, I guess, replacement quieter micro switches. This will go into this cable that already came with my existing button and joystick kit that I already mentioned. And so one end will go into the thing and the other end will go into the encoder board. The other route obviously is to replace the entire Tron joystick, because there's been many reports of the Arcade 1-Up Tron joysticks breaking. Unfortunately, either you have to buy an original arcade Tron joystick and attempt to wire that up, or what I'm doing is wait for Glenn to come out with a replacement Tron joystick that also includes a button on the top and a trigger button both, so that you can do things like play Discs of Tron with the deflector, etc. I decided to remove the control panel from the Arcade 1-Up, and as you can see from here, I removed everything, all the buttons, except for the Tron joystick, which I left in place, the on-off button, and the volume control. I even removed the spinner. I know you see the spinner here. When I turn it over, you can see there's nothing here on the board currently, just the Tron joystick, the on-off. This thing here is the housing from the original spinner. So this is the part of the original spinner that I just took completely apart. It was a big pain in the butt. I used Brad D's recommendation of just widening the hole for the existing spinner in a way where I could put now the GRS spinner. So this is the GRS spinner. I don't know if you can tell if it spins differently than the stock arcade. It has a push and pull action. And then these are all the existing connectors and wires that I just unplugged from the old Arcade 1-Up controller board from the existing Tron joystick. And then, of course, this is what I'm going to plug. The power is going to go directly to my Pi. There's a couple other videos that show how to create a script on the Pi so that you can have a button to turn your Pi on and off. So I'm just going to use the existing on-off button here with this connector plugged into some pins on my Pi that will turn the Pi on and off using the Arcade 1-Up on-off button. And then another one, but this is the volume control. So I'm gonna try to be clever and wire this to my VDI display board, which has a volume setting on it, connectors. The rest are holes that I'm going to fill with my new control, my new buttons that I bought. And then I'll move on to, I guess, plugging everything into the encoder board. Okay, so I finally got all the parts in and I wired everything up. Let me note real quick that I'm an amateur, so I don't really know how to cut or splice wires or add connectors or anything. I met my goals of not drilling or cutting or soldering. I also didn't cut any cables coming from the original Arcade 1-Up cabinet. There's a lot of parts from Arcade 1-Up I didn't use, but I didn't modify any of the parts from Arcade 1-Up that I didn't use. So I got new connectors for everything. I got a connector to plug in the speakers so I wouldn't have to cut the speaker wire. I did wind up replacing the micro switches on the joystick. It is the original Tron joystick, but the connectors that came with the Tron joystick, I would have had to cut them and do some weird splicing and stuff to use them. And I didn't want to cut any existing Arcade 1-Up connectors, but I did what I thought was easier. I just didn't use the existing connectors at all. I replaced the micro switches that I showed you that I bought from Amazon with the wiring harness, and I did replace all the buttons with the kit that I bought from Amazon, which operates as a mouse. So you literally have a USB port that's a mouse, and as long as your gaming device, which in my case is a RetroPie Raspberry 3B Plus, everything will work, and any games that can work with a mouse will use the spinner. I added a new button that's lit instead of the speaker jack. So this is my Mickey Mouse way of, but it looks good on the other side. And then I had my fair share of challenges getting everything plugged into the encoder board. As you can see here, where my finger is, this is where the joystick connects using my new wiring harness. The existing Arcade 1-Up joystick, but the micro switches and the wiring harness was changed to enable me to plug it directly in. For this particular encoder board, I learned kind of the hard way that you shouldn't plug any any buttons or joysticks or controllers on the left bank of the switches. On the right bank, it doesn't matter so much where you plug in your different buttons, but because you can map them in RetroPie, and I'm assuming you'll have to map them if you decide to go with a different arcade emulator, JAMA device, PC, or whatever. Just for RetroPie ease of use, I plugged two of the buttons for select and start into specific slots, even though it wasn't necessary. I had a lot of trial and error on mapping. So this is not a tutorial on how to map your buttons correctly to RetroPie for the different emulators, but you will spend a lot of time on that. Again, I'm Mickey Mouse, so I just taped everything down. I was able to manage to hook the on-off button to my Raspberry Pi so that I can use the on-off button to turn everything off and on. I got the speakers working, but I didn't yet hook up the volume control. All the buttons are lit up and they work fine. And again, I'm not going to explain the exact wiring I went to because mine's a big rat's nest and I went through hours of doing different things and trying different things. All I would advise is whatever encoder board you decide to buy, follow the documentation there, read a bunch of YouTube videos. ETA Prime was an author of some YouTube videos that were very helpful to me. Kong and particularly Brad D were the author of some YouTube videos that were helpful for me, but I got everything wired, installed, it works good, and I just wanted to give you a quick glimpse of my rat's nest of stuff, and where I plug things into my controller board. But everything's working really well. The VDI display, which is pretty much the key to everything, which is this circuit board that I'm showing you here. It literally only has two connections to the existing Arcade 1-Up monitor and a ground wire, which I made sure I did. The inputs are basically the power and the HDMI cable. I made an audio cable with the Amazon purchases so that I could plug my speakers directly into one end, and then the other end plugs into this slot on the thing. I still have to wire the volume controls to the back of this particular board. I'm just using a power strip. Of course, I will clean that up, I guess. I have one power to my Raspberry Pi, which is shown right here in the dark. I apologize, but this is my HDMI cable going into my Raspberry Pi, and if you can see, this is going directly to my power button on the Arcade 1-Up. I have 3 things plugged into USBs. One is the spinner, which it treats it as a mouse. The other one is a USB from the controller board. And the third one is a little USB plug for my keyboard, which I'm going to Velcro to the top of the cabinet in case I encounter additional games that need button mapping or modding. Other than that, I have been attempting to tape the wires to the wall a little more secure, but really that's all the wiring I did on the inside. It was a breeze on the inside. It was really wiring and mapping all the buttons, existing joystick to the encoder board that was a big pain, since any HDMI or any device with that can accept an encoder board with a USB input will work. So you could use JAMMA boards, you can use Pandora boxes, you can use of course PCs, which are the ultimate gaming emulator systems. So for me, one of the biggest hurdles that you guys will wind up with if you try to go on the cheap, and I did manage to do everything well under $200, which is a pleasant surprise, is you'll spend a lot of time in RetroPie configuring and button mapping, and you'll need to do that differently for different emulators, but it's worth it. So that's the complete of the wire. I'm going to now put on the back panel of the cabinet after I tape everything up and move everything where I want and close it up. And that's my entire build. So thanks for watching this, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to have fun with my Arcade 1-Up Tron.